And it sends a message to those women, you're not alone actually, and I will take a stand, I will stand up for you.
Well, joining me now is Stephanie Davis-Arai from No More Page 3, Kamara Lassarai from the IMCAM Feminist organisation, and Michael Buchanan from the Alternative Sexism Project. Now, I'm going to start with you, Kamara. Do you see that there is still a need for forums like Everyday Sexism?
Absolutely. I think sexism has been so normalised that when you do talk about incidents, it's kind of like, be serious, it's not a big deal. So I think a project like that allows people to go, actually, no, this has been happening and it's not okay, that's been happening, it's not okay, and kind of see how many people it's happening to, like, oh, it's not just me, loads of people are affected by this issue.
What do you think when you see forums like that?
I think it's amazing what Laura Bates has done. I think Everyday Sexism, in a sense, grew organically from one woman deciding to sort of put something on a website, and then there was a flood. And just from the amount of entries onto the Everyday Sexism Project website, you can see what a huge problem it is. And women, young girls, all ages, talking about the sexism they've experienced throughout their lifetime and often haven't told anybody about before. So, yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah, put it out there and let's discuss it. It's been hidden away, I think.
Now, everyday sexism, Mike, as a term, what do you think of that?
I think there's plenty of everyday sexism, but the serious sexism is against men and boys. Laura Bates is a whiny, miserable woman who runs a project that encourages other women to become whiny and miserable and dysfunctional. So basically, she's tapping into women's inclination to become special snowflakes, where there's no challenges. Everything, you know, she talks about the culture has to change. You can no more change a culture than you can change the weather. It is pathetic. It is infantilizing women beyond belief. And it's men who are suffering the real sexism today.
I'm sure someone would want to rebuttal that.
Well, it's interesting that when women actually stand up and call out sexism, they're always accused of moaning and whining, which is, we've just had a great example of everyday sexism, stereotyping women as whingers and moaners. And you've said it all, really.
Well, you know, I've been on her website, obviously. You know, we call it the Everyday Whining Project. And there are women complaining about things like, well, in fact, in her interview, complaining about, someone on a construction site saying, get your boobs out. I mean, what do we have to do? Go behind every woman with a fainting couch so that, you know, you only get strong in this life by meeting challenges. And if women are going to sort of pass out with shock at things like that, they're going to remain children.
Could I ask?
I think that you should have to tolerate sexual harassment, and I think the fact that the project is being discussed in that way, I think it's one thing to disagree, but I think when you start personally attacking someone who's created this project, which has had engagement from like tens of thousands of women, I think.
What can I say? There's lots of whiny women out there, and she's creating more of them.
Mike, if you had have female relatives, friends who came to you with a story of being touched inappropriately or spoken to inappropriately out and about, would your response be the same to them?
I'd expect them as strong women to deal with it at the time. You know, at the end of the day.
How would you see them deal with it?
Well, I would think, you know, if a woman's groped on a bus, for example, I think, you know, I hardly like to sort of suggest physical violence, but, you know, a slap or something of the man concerned, you know, would be appropriate. I looked last night at some of the reviews of Laura Bates's book on Amazon, and there are a number of 1-star. That's the lowest rating you can give. And I'll be 10 seconds on this. And
Mike, well, I don't see the merit in criticising, personally attacking. We're discussing the issue. We're discussing the wider issue of everyday sexism rather than Laura Bates in person.
Alex, I'm saying what women. This is a female reviewer saying everyday blathering on about mainly everyday occurrences that most people don't even register.
But I think that points to what we were discussing earlier about things being normalised.
And I think if you want to see strong women, this is the first step. The first step of being a strong woman is calling it out publicly and saying this is not okay.
But it's a tiny proportion of men
that's what women are starting to do. And the Everyday Sexism Project has really given women a voice and a platform which women have not had before.
Women have had a platform for decades in all sorts of areas. But it's just... you know, it is just ridiculous to think that. I mean, it's a tiny number of men who are doing this stuff, And to paint the whole of mankind, you know, all men with that brush, I think is outrageous.
I'm not sure who's painting all men with a brush.
Well,
who are you thinking
well,
about?
you know, this culture change. I mean, how is this culture change going to happen precisely? You know, Laura Bates can no more change the culture, along with her followers, than she can change the weather. It is just pathetic.
Let's go back to everyday sexism, and as I'll speak to Stephanie and Ikamara about this, because you'll have a different opinion, but what do you think the effects of everyday sexism, from something of being, you know, catcalled as you walk down the street, to something more serious, of which there are plenty of examples on that website, what do you think the impact is on that?
I mean, it's everything from self-esteem and kind of what opportunities are available to you, whether you begin to kind of shrink yourself to fit into society's expectations, or you're specifically told, no, you can't do this because of X. And then there's things like domestic violence. 1 in 3 women will have experienced domestic violence in their lifetime. 2 women die a week.
They do not.
Mike, we will...
Just factually wrong.
Mike, we'll get your point of view in a second, sorry.
So it's quite a big scale.
And to you, Stephanie, do you think it has...
I think it
carrying
has
on
an enormous impact, and the problem with those sort of casual everyday sexism examples is that the impact is largely invisible. You don't, you know, those supposedly small examples, they add up, and over a lifetime you're constantly reminded as a woman that you're there just as sexual entertainment, just as something for men to enjoy, and you're constantly reduced to that level. And every woman has her stories from childhood onwards of that kind of treatment, and the impact, I think, is huge, and I think it's bigger than we actually recognise, because I don't think human beings can live with that kind of seeing themselves mirrored back in that way without it having quite a deep effect.
Now, sexism, of course, affects both men and women, and I know that's something that you're interested in, but have you yourself ever experienced sexism?
Indeed, yes. About 5 or 6 years ago, I went for a management consulting position, a business consulting position in the public sector, and was turned down by a pretty vile feminist who had never been known to take on a male consultant. In fact, she just never, but she had to interview males. So that she could say that she saw as many males as females. But she would, the agency I went to admitted in the end that she would far sooner take on an incompetent woman than a competent man.
But I think people would be outraged by that as equally as they would be outraged by a man doing the same to women. Would you agree? I mean, sexism isn't just a feminist issue.
Yes, and when you get down to personal individual examples, of course there are going to be examples of the opposite happening. Of course there are. Okay. But overall, the sort of there's a very laddish sexist culture which holds women back on a far greater scale than it holds men back.
You have to be joking. There's nothing holding women back. There's a great deal. I mean, you know, I lead the political party Justice for Men and Boys, and in there we'll have 17 areas in our manifesto where the state assaults the human rights and interests of men and boys, and not one feminist in 5 years has ever been able to tell me one area where the state disadvantages women and girls. Not one. And I'd like to pick up on the issue, this is all about victimhood and getting power through victimhood. So the issue of 2 men dying, two women a week, is it? Yeah. That's like, there's no other word for it. That's just a lie.
That's true.
It's not. It was 88. It was once two a week. Over the last 10 years, the number of women killed by partners has declined by 25%. But that's just one of countless lying feminist narratives that we expose all the time.
Okay. I suggest you go and look at Counting Dead Women and the number of women who've been killed so far this year, and it supports that statistic.
I'm going to bring in some comments from our viewers now, because obviously this is a subject that's got a lot of people talking on our Facebook page. Let's have a look at some of the things you've been saying. So Francine says, some women believe in sexism and get offended at the slightest little thing, whereas men just don't seem bothered. I'm all for a bit of feminism and standing up for equal rights, but it seems to be going too far these days, and it's like trying to take over the world. So is it a case of women being too sensitive sometimes? Would you ever see an argument for that?
No. Basically. I think sometimes people get a little bit uncomfortable when people are trying to achieve equality, because it means making space for people that have thus far been marginalised. But I think when we start to go down the road of people are being too sensitive, I think it again comes back to what we're accepting as normal. Like, this is okay, you should just be able to tolerate that.
OK, let's get another tweet now, and we'll give you a chance to chat in a second. So Michelle says, everyday sexism, very prevalent in society, not helped by the media and its portrayal of women. Now, I'm going to bring you two in here, because this is actually something that you both are very outspoken about. It's about the portrayal of women and men in media. So they're saying that it's not helped by media.
I think the media really creates a culture where women are seen as sex objects, and obviously I work for the No More Page 3 campaign, which is the most famous example of that, where daily there is a gratuitous image of a nearly naked woman whose sole purpose is to titillate men. That doesn't happen to men anywhere throughout the print media, and that is a very public newspaper, and newspapers are, if a newspaper is used as a newspaper, that will be opened up in front of women, in front of children, it's in cafes, it's in pubs, it's on public transport. So we can't get away from it, and it's every time we see it as women, it's a reminder of our worth to society, and our society allows a national newspaper to print soft porn images of women that used to be on the top shelf. And so girls growing up in this culture get the message, yes, our whole society supports that and allows it. And so we get, we get the message from our society about our position in it.
We have literally 30 seconds left, Mike.
OK. Page 3 is just one example of a phenomenon. There are vast numbers of women who are very happy to exploit their attractiveness, whether it's in getting a well-off partner or going on Page 3 or whatever else. Women exploit their attractiveness. Women objectify themselves. So the idea that somehow it's some sort of conspiracy to keep women down is absolute nonsense.
And the presence of Page 3 as an advertisement for being that, exposing yourself publicly every single day is like an advertisement to young girls, that's what's expected of them. And an advertiser would pay billions for that space to advertise something.
I know that this could carry on for quite a while longer. I'm going to leave the last say to our viewers who've been getting in touch. Just a couple more tweets now. And Matthew says, at last, all us male psychopaths vindicated. Sociopaths, can't read that far away. Matthew writes, Simon says, at last, all our... Oh, again? OK, sorry. Rebel Girl says, sexism is usual, but the word normal implies its everydayness. It's OK. It's not OK. And last one here from Amai says, feminists strive for equality and fairness regardless of gender. How does that make life difficult for men? Obviously, this discussion is going to run on. Don't forget, you can have your say on our Facebook page and our Twitter page, but also we've been running a poll today asking you if you think sexism has become a norm in everyday society. Let's have a look at the results. 91% say yes, sexism has become a normal part of society. Do keep up the discussion on our website and our Facebook page. Thank you very much to all of our guests for coming in today. It's a very interesting topic.